Today I'm going to show you how to knit these quick and easy retro style hats. I'll show you every step from casting on to casting off. I knit these hats using my new Design Your Own Hat Knitting Templates book, which is available on Amazon now. The book includes 100 blank templates for you to sketch, design, and plan for your own hat designs. The first half of the book features hats with a folded up brim, and the second half of the book features hats with a single brim. Both styles come in two sizes, small, medium, and large. For those who prefer to design digitally, the template is also available as a digital download in my Etsy shop, which you can bring into any paint program to sketch out your design. For this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through how to make the single brimmed hat in the size large, which measures approximately 9.5 inches wide by 9 inches tall. The sizing for the small medium beanie is available in the book or in the digital download. For this project, I'll be using Loops and Threads Impeccable yarn in a wide range of blues, teals, oranges, and reds. The pattern is knit using a size 8 US 16-inch circular knitting needle, a size 9 US 16-inch circular knitting needle, a set of size 9 US double-pointed needles, a pair of scissors, a darning needle, a stitch marker, a knitting tag, a Pom Pom, my Design Your Own Hat knitting template, and a set of markers for sketching the design. All the supplies I'm using today are linked in the description below, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel for lots more fun, quick and easy knitting patterns and tutorials. For this design, I wanted to come up with a retro style. I'm an 80s baby myself, and I wanted to design a couple of hats that reminded me of the styles of my childhood, with the bright primary colors and bold blues. For the rainbow hat, I alternated 2 rows of each rainbow color with 2 rows of beige. For the blue hat, I wanted a nice mix of navy blues, oranges, and reds. I wasn't sure how thick the stripes should be, or if I wanted the stripes to continue all the way to the top, or just a band around the middle. So I played around with the design and sketched out a few ideas. And when I compared them, I decided to go with 7 stripes of 3 rows each. For anyone brand new to knitting, I'll be showing every step of the pattern in today's tutorial, but if you need a closer look at any of the steps, I'll link to my How to Knit playlist, which shows all the techniques in closer detail. To begin, use the smaller set of circular needles, the size 8 US circulars. We'll be casting on using the long tail cast on method. If you aren't familiar with this technique, I'll link to a video that shows it in full detail. I use the long tail cast on method because it creates a stretchier brim than the traditional cast on. For the size large, cast on 81 stitches. The hat will be 80 stitches in width, but we're casting on 1 additional stitch to use when joining in the round. I just finished casting on 81 stitches. Now we'll join the work in the round. Make sure your working yarn, the yarn that's attached to the skein, is on the back of your needles, and make sure that none of your stitches are twisted. To join the work, slip the first stitch from the left needle onto the right. Then use your left needle to bring the first stitch from the right needle over the slip stitch. The stitch will be a little loose at this point, so pull on both yarn tails to pull the stitch snug to the needle. Next, add a stitch marker to the right needle, which will mark where your rows are beginning and ending. For the ribbing, we'll knit 2 stitches and then purl 2 stitches, on repeat for the entire row, going back and forth, knitting 2 stitches, purling 2 stitches, knitting 2 stitches, purling 2 stitches. When you finish the first row, switch your stitch marker from the left needle to the right. We'll continue in this pattern, knitting 2 stitches and purling 2 stitches over and over on repeat for a total of 12 rows. The brim will measure roughly 2 inches tall. I just finished my 12 rows of ribbing, and now it's time to switch to the stockinette stitch. Unlike the ribbing where we switch back and forth between knits and purls, when we knit stockinette in the round, it simply means knitting every stitch of every row. First, I'll consult my template, and I see that for rows 13 to 15, I've designed the stockinette pattern to start with 3 rows of light blue. If you're designing your own hat using these templates, follow the colors on your template, but for my pattern, I'll be doing 3 rows of light blue. Before we get to the stockinette stitch, we need to move our work from the smaller needles, the size 8 needles, to the larger needles, the size 9 needles. Knitting the brim on smaller needles than the main part of the hat will help the brim stay tight and stretchy. To switch needles, simply slip all the stitches from the smaller needles one at a time to the larger set of needles. To switch colors, begin to knit your first stitch as normal, but instead of using the navy blue yarn, form a loop with the light blue yarn and pull it over your needle to knit the first stitch. On the next stitch, make sure you're using the yarn coming from your skein and not the tail yarn to continue knitting. After a couple of stitches, pause and tie a quick knot between the 2 yarn tails. We'll come back to finalize these knots at the end, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Just tie one quick knot and we'll finish it up at the end of the project. After your tails are knotted, continue knitting every stitch of every row for the next 3 rows. Next, I'll consult my template for rows 16 to 18. I'll be knitting 3 rows of teal. I'm gonna go sit in my comfy chair and listen to a good audiobook while I finish up the rest of the stripes. I'll continue following my pattern from the bottom to the top, knitting 3 rows of stockinette for each stripe of color for a total of 7 stripes, and I'll meet you back when we're ready to switch back to the navy blue. Okay, I just finished my 7 stripes, and now it's time to switch back to navy blue for the rest of the hat. Just like earlier, I'll form a loop with my new color and use that to knit the first stitch, and then after a couple of stitches, I'll secure a quick knot between the 2 tails. For rows 34 to 41, we'll be knitting straight stockinette stitch in the navy blue without any decreases yet. Okay, I just finished my 41st row, which means that it's time to start decreasing the stitches to form the top of the hat. This might look a little complicated for new knitters, but I promise that if you take it a step at a time, it's very simple. For the 42nd row, we'll begin our first decrease row. First, we'll knit 6 stitches like normal. Then we'll knit the next 2 stitches together, which will decrease those 2 stitches from 2 to 1. In knitting patterns, this is referred to as K2TOG, or K2TOG. I've never actually known how to say it out loud. We'll repeat this process, knitting 6 stitches and then knitting 2 stitches together until the end of the row when you see your stitch marker again. When you finish the 42nd row, switch the stitch marker to the right needle, and then for the next row, we'll knit every stitch like normal with no decreases. For the 44th row, we'll knit 5 stitches and then we'll knit 2 together, and we'll repeat that process until the end of the row. With every decreased row, you'll finish with less stitches on your needle than you started with. For the next row, go back to knitting every stitch without any decreases. For row 46, knit 4 stitches and then knit the next 2 stitches together and repeat until the end of the row. For the next row, it's back to knitting every stitch like normal. For row 48, knit 3 stitches and then knit the next 2 stitches together and repeat until the end of the row. Next row is back to knitting every stitch like normal. For row 50, knit 2 stitches and then knit 2 stitches together. When the stitches become too tight to knit comfortably on your circular needles, it's time to move the work to double-pointed needles. Double-pointed needles can be a little awkward to work with when you're first starting out, but it gets easier after a little practice. Slip roughly a third of the stitches from the circular to the first needle. You don't need to count the stitches exactly, just put roughly a third onto the needle. Grab a second needle and then put the second third onto that needle. Then grab a third needle and move the remaining stitches onto the third needle. You'll be using your 4th needle to knit, so you won't have any stitches on that needle. Use your open needle to begin knitting off the first needle, just the same as you would with your circular needles. It can take some practice to figure out how to juggle all the needles, but just take it slow and you'll get used to it. Next row, knit every stitch like normal. For row 52, alternate between knitting 1 stitch and then knitting 2 stitches together until the end of the row. Next row, knit every stitch. We're almost done with our hat. For row 54, knit 2 stitches together over and over until you have 7 stitches remaining on your needles. At this point, cut a long tail from your yarn and use a darning needle to pick up all 7 stitches onto your tail yarn and pull the top of the hat closed. Push the needle through the top of the hat and secure the yarn on the inside with a few tight knots. To finish the hat, turn the work inside out and secure each of the color change tails with a few tight knots. You can check the outside of the work to see how tight to make the knots. You want them tight enough that it brings the stitches together, but not so tight that it bunches up the work. You can either trim the tails or you can weave them in for a cleaner look. Next, I'm going to add a knitting tag to my hat, and I'll link below in the description to the shop where I order my tags. The last touch is to add a faux fur pom-pom. I like to secure the pom-pom with a few different stitches going in different directions to keep the pom-pom secured closely to the top. Our retro style hats are complete. If you make this project, I'd love to see your work. Tag me on Instagram at DianaLevineKnits. And if you'd like to purchase the Design Your Own Hat Knitting Template Workbook, please visit the Amazon link below, visit my Etsy shop for the digital download, or head to DianaLevineKnits.com to check out all my books and digital templates. And if you found this video helpful, please give it a like, comment below, and subscribe to the channel for lots more fun, quick and easy knitting patterns and tutorials.